Hello, friends. I'm Dr. Najawan, but you can just call me Raj. That's my nickname. And the presentation today is called The Brain Science of Agile, which means we as human beings have an infinite capacity to become more adaptable, more agile, more responsive to circumstances. And this is by building a concept called psychological safety. We can build psychological safety internally as well as externally within relationships. And that leads to incredible reductions of stress, as well as helping us to become more fearless, more dynamic, more energized to unlock our infinite potential to get better and better. And so the way this program came about is that I struggled a lot with issues of anxiety and emotional shutdown and type A personality, even narcissistic. A lot of struggles in the beginning that thankfully a couple angels showed up in my life. My wife of 35 years, who is a therapist conveniently, who created a safe space for me to really continue to grow as a human being. And then a dear friend of mine who is 1 year ahead of me in medical school, Scott Streckenbach, who helped me to fall in love with self-help literature, but as well as the science of becoming better all the time, and helped me to really get more and more effective as a human being. And so I learned a lot over the last 35 years, almost 59. I've been working on this stuff since I was 22, so now almost 37 years. And over the last decade, I've been very successful in sharing these tools with others with measured impact, which I will share with you shortly. And my heart goes out to you, especially as Americans. We're really struggling right now. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of shutdown, depression, loneliness, substance use, violence, political polarization. And hopefully, this presentation will help you understand why that's happening, but that we can pretty quickly stabilize our brains and sort of shape our brains to serve us better in this moment of great rapid change, complexity, destabilization. So, again, my heart goes out to you for how difficult it is to be in modern times, but there is a lot of hope in this presentation. And so, this program basically in this presentation today, we'll talk a little bit about the history, which I've kind of done, but we'll talk about the outcomes that are very hopeful. And again, this is all done as a nonprofit. I'm not driven by the money or the fame. This is a way for me to give back. But yet I get a lot out of it when I see others flourish and stabilize and then flourish. It really warms my heart. And that's really what motivates me. So we'll talk about why you want to learn to become what we call higher brain dominant. There's a battle going on right now that very few human beings are even aware is happening between what I call the higher brain and the lower brain. And you can really, if you get organized, you can be very successful at winning that battle, so to speak. And so we'll talk about some of the motivational juice that you need to really devote the time to this and take on some of the discomfort that's required to become higher brain dominant while your lower brain is kind of pulling you back and yelling at you and taking away your energy and trying to block you from doing this. And so we do need a little bit of motivational juice to overcome the lower brain barriers. And so then we'll talk about sort of what's the strategy here, which is basically learning to embrace and even fall in love with discomfort of every kind you can imagine: emotional, intellectual, accountability, physical, relationship discomfort. The more discomfort you can embrace, the more effective you'll be, and the more fearless you'll become, and the more dynamic and higher brain dominant you'll become. And you'll notice that all aspects of your life start to become richer. And so then we'll end up with a kind of practical system for making this come alive and move from lower brain to higher brain dominant. And the outcomes that we've gotten over the last 6, 7 years, incredible across all industries. You can see eating problems after just a 12 or 14-hour program over a couple of months, right? So 5 or 6 or 7 2-hour sessions, you can see a profound improvement here in eating problems, as well as sleep problems, as well as energy problems. And this is across industries, right? except when you survey teachers in May. That's not the best idea in the world because they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off trying to wrap up the school year. And even such difficult things to move. I mean, even sleep by itself is very difficult to improve. But look at these profound improvements, right? As well as improvements in depression and anxiety. And again, these survey tools are standardized psychometric tools that are have been validated, and you can see that there's consistent levels across industries, and then consistent improvement across industries. So very exciting, very hopeful of what groups of human beings are capable of doing. And this is anywhere from 10 people to 80 people at a time. And then we measure something called psychological safety, which is the ability to be uncomfortable. Can you be uncomfortable in a team sharing ideas or having open discussions about problems, admitting mistakes and holding ourselves accountable to mistakes? And you can see that the substantial improvements in psychological safety happen after a pretty short intervention. So very hopeful. That's what I want you to take away from this. Part of that kind of motivational juice, if you will, that we are very capable of transforming our brains quite quickly. And then we were fortunate to receive a grant from the state of Wisconsin to implement this with high school students. In Wood County, you can see, tremendous improvements in quality of life, stress handling, social media usage, peer influence reduction. And I've been told by experts in this field that, a 10% improvement is quite substantial. And we have sometimes 20, 30, 40% improvements. And then it was replicated in another county of students. And so that's, again, very exciting of what we as human beings are capable of doing and becoming more higher brain dominant. And really, there's only one thing that can kind of explain all these positive changes happening, and that is that, and that was the original theory that I had in putting this program together, is what if we teach groups of people and to be in community and learn tools to both shut off their lower brain and activate their higher brain. If we have a robust enough toolkit doing this as a community, what could happen? That's the innovation here, is an aggregation of people, an aggregation of tools, and see what happens. And that's exactly what's happening. And it was predicted based on brain science. So that's very exciting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about motivation in terms of really, because you're going to have to push into, devoting some time, taking on some discomfort, being more vulnerable, being a little bit organized. So yeah, there's a little bit of some barriers to that from the lower brain that will get in the way. Okay, so it turns out that uh, everything that matters in life is a neural network. So basically, you have all these neural networks around your brain. Your brain is made up of 100 billion neurons, I believe it is. Each one of this long stem is a neuron, and then you have branches off of it called dendrites. And really, everything in life is a neural network. As it expands, you get better and better in terms of knowledge, understanding, skills. Happiness is a neural network. Self-regulation is a big one, which is the ability of the higher brain to cool down and even shut off the lower brain, so become more and more tolerant of difficulty and discomfort, difficult conversations, pushing the edge of our comfort zone in terms of knowledge and understanding and skills, being accountable for our performance, having debates with people over ideas and battling over ideas, but doing it in a way that you stay very self-regulated. So self-regulation is a big key to the kingdom. Why do this, right? This is the why section, motivation. Because when you push yourself to the edge of your comfort zone, you actually produce way more happiness than what most people are aware of, dopamine, right? Dopamine is a novelty neurotransmitter. And every time you achieve something new or make a discovery or have a new experience or get a raise or get some money, you get a little rush of dopamine because it's something new that may give you an advantage in life. But it turns out that there's way more happiness produced by being, rather than getting validation from the outside and pleasure from the outside, being on the edge of your comfort zone and expanding your neural networks and even your social networks and the way you do work, your processes, expanding, being on the edge and making things constantly improve. produces even other neurotransmitters besides dopamine, way more dopamine because you keep every branch that you lay down, it's a novelty, it's a discovery, it's a dot connection that happens, dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. So internal sources of dopamine are much greater, and as well as norepinephrine and anandamide. These are neurotransmitters of exhilaration and dot connecting. And then as you get more and more advanced in building this beautiful neural network of either self-awareness and self-regulation, learning and innovation, social connection, difficult conversations, depth of relationships, leadership, happiness, spiritual, these are all neural networks. You get even other kinds of neurotransmitters such as serotonin and GABA and oxytocin, which is the love or connection neurotransmitter. And so you get more exhilarated and have more beauty and fulfillment in your life as you push on the edge of your comfort zone in every way. And the two keys, as I say here, are basically how much time you put in and how much feedback you can tolerate. Now, think about that. When I say feedback, asking for feedback, unexpected feedback, ooh, it sends shudders down your spine, right? Or your stomach knots up or your heart, drops. We do not like feedback, and we'll explain why that is from an evolutionary perspective. Okay, so as I said, everything is a neural network. Self-regulation or self-awareness, a neural network. Gratitude, neural network. Tenacity, the ability to push forward and really not give up and keep coming back, that's a neural network. Creativity, that's a neural network. And these things can expand as much as you want them to expand. That's what's so exciting. People haven't caught up to the superpowers that we have of neuroplasticity and blood flow control. Love is a neural network. Can you imagine that? You can become as loving as you want to be, and you get to just experience that feeling of love and be in that form of happiness as much as you want to. Okay. And so, and the evidence is all over. It's been definitively proven that you have a superpower called neuroplasticity, that in fact, it's not talent that's the key. It's the time that you put in to build skill, right? It's tolerance of feedback as well as devotion of time. And so that's why child prodigies typically don't go on to success. Chess masters tend to have a lower IQ than you would predict. The famous discovery that 10,000 hours is the amount of time you need to put in of a certain, what's called deliberate practice with really good feedback is what it takes to achieve mastery. It's not about talent. Do not let your lower brain talk you into the idea that you're not talented enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. That is untrue. That has been disproven. And so all this evidence taken together shows that success is really achievable by everyone because everyone has access to time. You can find the feedback and you can increase your tolerance for discomfort, which is another neural network. And so that's very hopeful and scary because the lower brain doesn't want to deal with the discomfort of failure and loss and rejection. Okay, so that's the key. And so the reason you want to push to the edge of your comfort zone and become what I call higher brain dominant is that it's exhilarating. It leads to more success. And the success is actually not about the external validation and pleasure and resources. It's more about having a platform, a gymnasium, if you will, to build your higher brain, because it's that every step that you take of creating a new neural network is exhilarating, creates much greater sense of fulfillment as you improve this system, more connection with others, and you keep exposing your lower brain because it's reacting to being on the edge of your comfort zone by saying, no, don't lose, don't be rejected, don't lose out, don't, fail. And so as we expose our lower brain, we get greater and greater mastery over the lower brain. We understand it better. We develop a relationship. We soothe it. We reassure it, and the lower brain starts to cool down as you prove that what you're bringing, the strategies that you're bringing, and the payoffs that we're receiving are really worth it. And so, in stress, anxiety, boredom, depression, addiction, as I said, we're dealing with all these problems right now. And that's the advantage of being on the edge of your comfort zone is that you get these higher brain payoffs, but you also get the payoff of getting greater mastery over your lower brain. And that becomes kind of a virtuous cycle. As you get mastery over your lower brain, you become more fearless, more on the edge of your comfort zone, more dot connecting, more all the above. And that's what I mean by, the brain science of agile is that as we get mastery over our lower brain, we move up to what I call level two of happiness. And I'll show you that in a second. And so we increase our capacity for self-regulation, you become more fearless. As you become more fearless, you become more exhilarated, successful, fulfilled, connected. But then you every once in a while expose a part of your lower brain that needs a little work, and that you do that work and you have another level of lower brain mastery and you become even more higher brain. That's the virtuous cycle that is available to everybody and is the richest form of life you can experience. So, in fact, there are, by my calculation, six levels of happiness. Level one is where most people are stuck through no fault of their own. This is human design over the last 4 million years. We're addicted to dopamine from external sources, external validation, external group inclusion, external pleasure, external resources. But that's only level one. That's just dopamine. As you move higher and take more risk and become more aware of your lower brain, and get more and more relationship and mastery over your lower brain, you produce GABA, a neurotransmitter called GABA that can just cool down your lower brain. That's another level of happiness that includes peacefulness. And then you become creatively fearless. You're on the edge of your comfort zone. And so you're producing even more neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and anandamide. But that also gives you greater exposure of your lower brain, greater mastery, going back even better movement towards level two, level three. And then you take more relationship risk because you have greater ability to self-regulate. You become more bold. So as you go higher and higher, it's more discomfort, it's more scary, but it's also bigger payoffs that happen because you have now oxytocin starting to be released. And then you become creatively fearless as a group. That creates all kinds of beautiful outcomes of products and services and community and connection. So serotonin starts to come more and more. And then finally, you just become in love with everything and everyone, just being a conduit for energy and ideas and people to flow through to come together and experience the magic of what's possible in this world at even a quantum level. Okay, so that's why I love this quote from Goethe that says that whatever you can do or dream, you can. Begin it. Boldness has genius, I'd say magic next, and power, because you do have to be, why boldness? Because you have to be somewhat fearless in order to be on the edge of your comfort zone. But then what happens is you start to expand neural networks of every kind. That's genius. Genius is simply more expanded neural networks, and everyone has access to genius. Most people don't know that. And then as your neural networks of self-regulation and innovation and learning and depth of connection and relationships and leadership and happiness and spirituality, all these networks, you can dot connector better. That's creativity. That's magic. And then if you flow that magic into the world for the sake of making people's lives better, that's power. The power to really make a difference. Not the power over people, but the power to really make people's lives better. And that has its own happiness rewards. And so, and this is like an homage to Bruce Lee and the idea that, there's a little bit of work to do because the lower brain has been around for 4 million years. The higher brain has been around for only about 200,000 years. And so the lower brain is not going down without a fight. It's there to block you from going from level one to two to three. And I think in the Bruce Lee movie, they were going levels of the building and progressively, more and more difficult battles. And so the lower brain is a very worthy adversary that we need to kind of develop a relationship with and flow with in order to really start to move up the levels of happiness and power. And so this is a fun little video here to kind of make this come alive and for you to recognize that you have two superpowers. One superpower is the ability to your thoughts actually drive where the blood goes in your brain. From one moment to the next, you only have a certain amount of blood that comes in. Your thoughts control where the blood goes. They can go lower brain or it can go higher brain. Most people, and especially most Americans, are very lower brain now because of all the reasons that I talked about. It's a very vicious cycle that's happening. And so lower brain neural networks expand and all the blood goes there unconsciously. So the two superpowers are your thoughts control where the blood goes, and the neural networks that you focus on and nourish start to expand and automatically bring the blood there, lower or higher. And so that's the idea here. Let me see if I can play this. So you can see how as time goes on, we're driving the blood higher and higher, and those neural networks are expanding, and the lower brain neural networks are starting to shrink. Okay. And that's what happens when you put practice in, you put attention, emotions, you get feedback, you have all these neural networks that start to expand progressively. And in fact, what I was showing you here, again, to play that again, you can see we're moving more and more towards higher brain blood flow, and these neural networks are starting to expand. So self-awareness neural networks, and there's a fascinating spillover that starts to happen as you go from level one of happiness and power to level six, is that first you become self-aware and you accept the lower brain. Then you spill over into recognizing, oh, I have unlimited value because I can become as higher brain as I want to, and I can teach this to other people. So you realize, okay, my value is not dependent on external success, even though you should push to get better and better and do better and better. But the main reason is because that's a platform or a gymnasium to build your higher brain. Challenge helps you to build your higher brain. And so paradoxically, we do even better with external outcomes because we take the pressure off of the outcome. Uh, and so gratitude starts to improve because we just start to slow down, not be so stressed and put pressure on ourselves, and appreciate what's, everything that we have internally, externally, relationship wise in this world, moment to moment. Gratitude expands our value, our definition of us, of our self-worth changes and expands. We become more creatively fearless and curious. Those neural networks expand. We start to become better at learning and innovating. And then in time, we develop more deeply connected relationships because we get really good at being non-competitive, non-judgmental, really supporting other people and being successful, supporting them emotionally and creatively, but also prove that we can have really difficult conversations effectively. And that builds psychological safety externally. So this builds psychological safety internally, and that in time spills over to building psychological safety externally. Okay. And so that's a little bit on the why, the motivation to become higher brain dominant, because you need motivation because your lower brain is going to be there waiting for you, ready to block you. And that's why we need to remind ourselves there are a lot of payoffs from level one to two to three to four to five to six, a lot of happiness payoffs. But there's also the payoff of building these muscles to be able to cool down the lower brain to create less stress and less of the negative effects of the lower brain, including anxiety, stress, fear, depression, addiction, chronic disease, chronic pain, political polarization. We get the payoffs of cooling those down and the payoffs of all the higher brain activation, like we talked about, exhilaration, fulfillment, connection, etc. Okay, so basically, strategically, is very simple. It's just embracing discomfort. That's it. And in fact, the reason the lower brain showed up over the last 4 million years, when you look at these different parts of the brain, we talk about, fear and anxiety and, stress. And when I ask people, why is this there? And most people say, survival. And in fact, for most of human history, the average life expectancy was only 27 years of age. So it wasn't doing a very good job of survival. In fact, the reason the lower brain showed up is because it got really good at survival of the genes. So mating success was the reason this, what I call the limbic system, not the reptile brain. That's lower and has more to do with automatic functions like breathing and cardiac function and GI, gastrointestinal function. That's more reptile brain is lower, but limbic system in the middle part of the brain is what I call the lower brain. And that's there really to improve mating success. What's the key to mating success? Be part of a tribe, be high ranked in the tribe, have resources and have, opportunity and novelty to be able to trade knowledge and resources for the sake of being higher ranked and having a mate and then passing the genes on and then, that's the goal of the lower brain. So it's been around for a long time and it's very powerful. And so, in fact, what's happened in modern times is that we have a lot of dopamine available to us. Dopamine, again, is released when we have new experiences, novelty. Now, that can be just streaming. That can just be eating stuff. It can be, being online and social media. So the issue is that we have access to a lot of dopamine. And so the lower brain's like, you know what, we're doing fine. We're part of a tribe and we're fine. We have resources, we're fine. And so it kind of lulls us into complacency. But the problem is that over time we get bored. And so there's boredom, there's depression, but then we lose the muscle that allows us to tolerate the dopamine drop. So the lower brain's yelling at us when we are at the edge of our comfort zone, like we talked about. And so what it does is it's constantly taking energy away from us to block us from moving forward because it's afraid of us losing tribe, losing status, losing the opportunity that we already have. It's constantly saying, we have enough, we have enough, we have enough. And so it's blocking us. We have to cross this bridge, the dopamine drop bridge, as I said. We have to tolerate discomfort more and more in order to be in the edge of our comfort zone to move, expand those neural networks and social networks and process networks, how we do things in order to move to level 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of happiness. And so, what's happened and the natural phenomena of being in modern societies and having plenty of wealth and security is that we don't develop the higher brain muscle that allows us to tolerate greater creative risk, being more fearless. And so, lower brain's just looking for reasons to not do things and to blame the situation and blame other people in order to not be responsible for going to the right, going to the promised land of greater and greater, fulfillment and exhilaration and connection and self-mastery. And so we've really become stuck on level one. And so that's why we need to embrace discomfort. And I'm going to next teach you a system for being able to systematically embrace and navigate discomfort. And that's going to let us go from level 1 to 2 and then we'll take off to the other levels as we get better and better at navigating the lower brain. Okay. But in the meantime, there's tremendous loss occurring right now for the vast majority of human beings, including those who are wealthy and successful, may not realize that they're still stuck on level 1. Even if you have a lot of money and you're successful, you're not necessarily creatively joyful, relationship loving, peaceful, ego transcendent. You're missing out on a lot. You're missing out on a lot of these. You may be getting a lot of dopamine as a wealthy, successful person, but you're missing out on all these other things, and because you're too focused on the outcome. And the beauty of it is that all human beings have access. Maybe very few can win level 1 of being at the top of the rank, top of the hierarchy for looks or money or success or fame or whatever. That's 1 in 1,000 that can win that game. The great news is all of us can win the game of going to level 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All these are accessible to everyone. The other loss that's happening is that we're having the suffering of lower brain activation because we're not building the muscle of going to the right. And so that we sit here stewing in our juices, bored, depressed, increasingly anxious, increasingly lonely and isolated, and then damage to our bodies and our brain. Okay. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to show that we do not have free will, that the decisions are being made by our supercomputer of our brain that's been programmed by life, especially the lower brain that's been programmed by a lot of trauma, a lot of evolutionary biology. And so it's got its agenda and it's driving where it's giving us energy to move forward and pulling energy away to withdraw and not take risk. And so lots of evidence to prove that we do not have free will until we start to embrace emotions. Now, when I say emotions, it's good to be emotional. Most people have kind of a weird reaction to that. What are you talking about? That's the opposite of what I've been taught. We're not supposed to be emotional, we're supposed to be in control, right? The reality is you are not in control if you're not attuned to your emotions and your body. Why? Because the only way that you can really have access to what your lower brain is doing, and it's very powerful and it's controlling the energy until you can develop a relationship with it. The only way is to embrace discomfort, to embrace emotions, because then you have an idea of what your lower brain is doing, and you can start to develop a relationship with your lower brain and prove to it that you've got a strategy that's a win-win to be able to achieve what it wants and what you want as a human being to produce maximum happiness, as we've said. So it turns out that emotions, being emotional, being attuned to your emotions in your body is very important. Okay. Now, as a little break, typically this is where I would ask show of hands in an audience and say, how many of you either personally or know somebody close to you that's dealing with anxiety or depression or boredom or loneliness or substance use or chronic disease, chronic pain, political, polarization, right? It's almost everybody, especially in the United States. And so right now, we're losing the game of life because we're become so lower brain dominant. We're in a vicious cycle of being lower brain. And so we have to come up with a better system for being able to navigate and be in relationship with the lower brain in order to escape its gravity and start to move higher. Okay? And so take a moment, pause this screen for a second, catch your breath, ask yourself, what do you agree with so far? What do you disagree with? What's uncomfortable? What's inspirational? What's confusing regarding the idea of why we want to lift weights, if you will? And I'm going to show you that analogy coming up, but why we want to push to the edge of our comfort zone in order to build a higher brain. Do I buy into all those payoffs, right? And the strategic notion of we need to embrace discomfort to build a higher brain. Do you buy into that? That we need to, in fact, accept emotions and accept our lower brain in order to understand it and navigate around it in order to go higher, right? And that the outcomes that I've shown you from very short intervention, 5 or 6 or 7 2-hour interventions over, a 3 to 4 month period, like human beings can shape their brains really fast to serve their needs in this moment in time where there is so much complexity, so much change, so much destabilization, so much lower brain activation. Take a moment and think about that in terms of, what's moving you in a positive or a negative way. We're okay with the negative, and then you'll find a way to communicate that to me, and we'll continue this conversation. Okay, let's move forward. So we've spoken so far about kind of my history and my own mental health struggles and why I had to learn these things. And then over the last 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to be able to teach this to thousands of people. We've had some great outcomes. So it's very hopeful. You can do this. It doesn't matter where you are, how lower brain you are, just step by step, get a little bit better and have fun with the game of getting just a little bit better. Do not compare yourself to other people. In fact, if someone else is on a 0 to 100 scale, zero is very lower brain and you're dependent on external pleasure and external validation, you're narcissistic, you're hedonistic, you're pain avoidant, you're conflict avoidant, that's okay. It's probably because of various kinds of trauma that you had. Don't compare yourself. Someone may be at an 80, they got lucky to be there, but their game is not to say, look how great I am. Their game is to go to 84, 85, 86. Your game is to go from 5 to 6 to 10 to 15. The idea of comparing, because you got unlucky, they got lucky, comparing does not make sense. It's an evolutionary biological trick because we're obsessed with rank and comparison. Play your own game in order to then be really all in on getting better. And so there are a lot of payoffs of pushing higher, and we need to embrace discomfort. And so now we're going to talk about a system for really being systematic about embracing discomfort. And so I look at life and work as a gymnasium. So basically, you'll learn brain tools and combinations of brain tools, what I call action plans, to take on discomfort, which is then going to build psychological safety. Certain neural networks will start to expand that keep you self-regulated, and you're like, I got this, I can do this. And so you get more and more confident, you take more and more risk, you expose more and more aspects of your lower brain that you learn to navigate and develop a relationship with that builds even more psychological safety. And then you start to expand this into your relationships. And that leads to unbelievable payoffs. Nothing is more important than working on becoming higher brain and lifting weights to build the higher brain. Payoffs, lower brain payoffs, as we've talked about, as well as all these higher brain payoffs, right? So we've discussed that quite extensively in the whys section. Okay. And doing this as a community, I have now discovered when I had groups of people traveling together doing this, very effective. When people were on their own computers, or I was doing a theater style for most of the program, it did not work. So, aha, the community was a big factor in being successful. When we did this together, it was much more effective. Okay, we need each other in this day and age. Okay, so let's talk about a system for, dealing with discomfort, embracing discomfort, even pushing into discomfort on purpose. Self-regulation. It's expanding that part of our brain that can understand and cool down the lower brain. And in a sense, we're basically reparenting our lower brain because our lower brain developed because of trauma. The trauma of a parent who's too oppressive, too domineering, or too neglectful, or puts you down, or falsely elevates you and counts on you to make them happy, or is unpredictable, right? Either not present, or alcoholism or substance use, or emotionally volatile. Like we've all been dealing with little t to big T trauma. Sexual and physical abuse are just extensions of those 5 categories, right? So we're all somewhere along that little t to big T in those 5 categories. The details don't matter. 99% of us probably had some degree of trauma. Some had a lot. Okay. And that's what lands us somewhere on the 0 to 100 scale of whether we're lower or higher brain dominant. That's okay. Have acceptance for yourself. Your game is to just move higher from where you are. And so what we're going to do in this 4-step process is we're going to identify what's activating my lower brain. What's the trigger? What's the dysregulator? What's the sign that I'm lower brain? I'm going to give you a nice little checklist to identify that you're lower brain. And then what's the story that my lower brain is telling? And then how can I shift from lower to higher? Okay, so that's the 4-step process of self-regulation. In time, I'll teach you a 6-step process of co-regulation that we can really help each other go more and more higher brain. And that's even more beautiful. Okay, so here's a list of all the categories of discomfort as far as I'm concerned. It's emotional discomfort, creative discomfort, performance discomfort. Did I trigger somebody or did they trigger my lower brain somehow? Are we battling over ideas, accepting ideas, rejecting ideas, conflicting over ideas, acknowledging when somebody else's idea is better? As you go lower and lower, it becomes more and more difficult. And so the ultimate is performance discomfort, like accountability for how well we're doing our job. All these activate the lower brain, but I say take all negativity of people and situations and thoughts and turn them into basically barbells or dumbbells to build a higher brain. That's what we're going to do. Lemons to lemonade. We're going to harness all the negativity inside and around us and use it to become more higher brain. So we're going to focus on the category in this discussion. We're going to have you sort of think through your life is the idea of let's focus on the hardest one of all, feedback that you were not expecting to get. Feedback just came to you. And it could be a situation. I want you to start thinking about a situation that comes to you where you were kind of like, ugh, someone just came and started saying, I don't agree with what you did, or I don't think we did a good job, or I don't think you did a good job, or I think you made a mistake, or like it could be done in a very mean way, or a critical way, or a cranky way, or a, cold way, like, like, you know, for me, it's like my heart tightens up and my head starts to steam up, and I want to like fight back and argue and defend you know, and so we all have different reactions. And so think about a scenario that you found kind of dysregulating in the category of feedback that was not asked for. Okay. And kind of put it down in your mind's eye or write it down if you want to. Okay. Step two then is to say, in that scenario, what were the signs that my lower brain was activated? Now, almost nobody does this, but what's very interesting is just by virtue of identifying which category of lower brain activator this is, that's the higher brain that's doing that. It's being a detective. It's saying, okay, very interesting. The lower brain is activated right now. I think it's this category. And then doing this process of identifying that your lower brain is activated is also a way to activate the higher brain. It's the higher brain that's doing this analysis, doing this detective work, and it can actually pull you out of the lower brain by virtue of doing the analysis and being self-aware. The more granular you are in being self-aware, paradoxically, the more you actually step out of the lower brain and the lower brain cools down and you drive blood up to the higher brain, right? So here are signs that the lower brain is activated. Loss of energy or boom of energy, and you kind of move forward and attack or defend, right? That's where I go. That's my tendency. I do not withdraw. I go too much energy going forward. It can be in both directions. Any negative emotion is lower brain activating, and that's a sign the lower brain is worried about losing something. You get little tunnel vision or foggy thinking, relationship tension. Your partner can be a really good mirror for, how you are. Your lower brain tells you that you're fine. We're fine, we're fine, we're fine. That's always what it's doing. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to take risk. Why are we taking risk? Everything is fine, right? But if you look at your partner, they're mirroring back to you that you're not so fine. So relationship tension is a good truth teller about where you're actually at. Body signs too. A lot of us, because of trauma, won't face negative emotions and won't even acknowledge this, the social part of lower brain activation, because we're too self-protected. We're too traumatized, too shut down. This is certainly true for me. It took me, 40 years before I started to crack the ice on emotions and social, empathy and awareness of what's going on with the other person relative to me. But body signs are still there. Tightening of muscles, faster heart rate, faster breathing, sweating, flushing. The signs that you're like, your lower brain is activated. And then self-soothing behaviors. You need to run to the, get ice cream or eat something or drink something or substance or whatever it is, internet streaming. Like if you're really needing to get away, that's a sign that your lower brain was activated and really spinning subconsciously. But we need to make it more conscious to develop a relationship with the lower brain in order to navigate it and start to separate from it so it's not subconsciously driving the show and taking away our free will and deciding how to use energy and where to go, where not to go. We want to have control over our brain to bring us more happiness, fulfillment, success, all the things that we talked about. So being aware of these patterns is helpful. Now, if this is too threatening to you, it's okay. You know what? Just say, very interesting, call it a day. if you feel like your lower brain is becoming very activated because you're trying to become aware of it, there's a part of your lower brain that's blocking you because there's a part of our lower brain that doesn't want to acknowledge the rest of the lower brain. It's like you have all these algorithms that have developed in your lower brain for different kinds of life trauma, situational trauma, evolutionary biology. So, how many of you use, AI, ChatGPT or Perplexity or one of the other ones like Gemini, et cetera? It's really interesting, but the lower brain develops different algorithms to protect relative to lessons learned from different kinds of trauma that we talked about. And so, really good evidence to show that uh, your first, one of the major protective parts that shows up, or AI that shows up, that develops, is the desire to not acknowledge the lower brain, to not acknowledge negative emotions, because for a part of the lower brain, that represents death. If you fool, if you acknowledge those negative emotions, like, are you crazy? We're gonna lose status, we're gonna lose access to the tribe, we're gonna lose opportunities. So there's a part of you that's like, I don't think so. And so that's where, sometimes for some of us, just even starting to go in this direction can be very destabilizing. So just keep it simple and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to be aware of the lower brain. I'm going to learn some tools to activate my higher brain, and we'll call it a day. You don't have to do the deep dive into the lower brain if you find it very destabilizing. Just because you had trauma in your life, it's not your fault. Take it slower. Take it slower. That's okay. And so the third step in this four-step process is to say, what's the story that my lower brain is telling? Again, this detective work, this analysis can help you to kind of understand the different parts of your lower brain, develop a relationship with it, soothe it in some way to show it that we will take care of what it's worried about. Is it willing to back off a little bit and not take over? And then just that detective work itself can flip you out of the lower brain. So is it that a part of you, part of your lower brain is worried about loss of status or tribe? It doesn't want you to be offended or be criticized or look incompetent, right? That's a big one. That's the biggest one for all of us. Is it that the C, craving, that we don't want to lose out on pleasure and opportunity, resources? Is it just uncertainty, broadly speaking, which is kind of like the Wizard of Oz that just has these two dopamine strings in the background, the O and the C? And so we just don't like uncertainty about the future, environment, people, the rules, the future, as I said, and that's where we're, as Americans, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty about the future. And that's been very destabilizing and activating of the lower brain. And then we'll talk about this another time, but when you are already lower brain activated, that's not a good time to be having difficult conversations or trying to have to necessarily push yourself to the edge of your comfort zone. Get stabilized first, and then push to the edge of your comfort zone. So in your scenario, what do you think your lower brain, what's it telling you? What's it worried about? Start to, see if it'll talk to you, because it will. You'll start to recognize different parts of you that are reacting to different circumstances or people or thoughts. And you can start to understand how that algorithm, what it's there for, how it's protecting you, what it's worried about, when did it show up, how does it show up in your body. Okay? Okay. Next step, final step is don't be overwhelmed by all these tools. These are the tools that I'll teach you over time to activate the higher brain. We'll get better and better at saying, I'm lower brain, let's shift higher. Okay. But what I will teach you right now is the categories. So one category, and again, it corresponds. Remember the self-awareness brain that we talked about? Just being aware, which is what you're doing now, is very powerful at shifting us higher, right? So that by itself, some degree of self-awareness is by itself powerful. Or it can be you tell a different story about the situation. This is not as bad as we think it is. We've got a lot of good things in our lives. We're going to use this as lemons to lemonade. We're going to use this opportunity to lift weights and build our higher brain. So let's not, catastrophize that we are lower brain right now. There's always one part yelling at the other part, and then they're yelling back, and there's this cacophony happening in the lower brain. We're going to just cool everybody down and say, it's okay, everybody. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for protecting us. Here's why we shouldn't worry. Or it can be we gamify the situation. That's the more the middle part of the brain, tenacity, and grit and gamification. Let's take this situation and harness some learning from it and expand a knowledge network or understanding network or a skill network or a relationship neural network or a social network. Let's take something out of this and we'll learn something, we'll expand our neural network, and that's great. Or you can directly activate the higher brain with different techniques, breathing techniques, prayer, meditation, etc. There may be something in that category that you already do. In your scenario, what would you do to shift from lower to higher? And then there's social techniques that really have to do with how to not be competitive with each other, how to be non-judgmental with each other, how to be supportive of each other, and also how not to think in all or none terms, good, bad, smart, dumb, success, failure. Like it's all in a continuum. Just go a little bit better and better. And so social techniques have to do with, learning to work together and help each other out to shift from lower to higher. Okay. So in your scenario, just think about what tools might you use from these five categories, that will allow you to kind of shift from lower to higher. If nothing in your scenario, you didn't do anything and you just waited for it to burn out, that's fine too. We're just accepting ourselves as we are, becoming curious scientists of our brain. That by itself makes us more higher brain. Okay, so having done that exercise, every single time you do this, the four steps, you expand a part of your neural network of your higher brain and you drive more blood there and you expand it, nourish it, and that pulls up more blood automatically. And so the lower brain over time keeps shrinking. And so it gets less blood, less nutrients, it starts to shrink, it pulls blood less automatically. That's a virtuous cycle that we can all get on right now. Every single time you do this four-step process and later on the six-step process, every moment, some people say, oh, it'll take time to build my higher brain. No, it can happen instantaneously. If there's focus and emotions, you release something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which creates those branches that we showed you on the neural networks. You start to expand those branches really quickly. Remember, sometimes if something is a negative emotion or a positive emotion, you'll remember that event forever, right? How is that? That's instantaneous neuroplasticity. You locked it in, right? So that's why emotions are so valuable in part, is they enhance neuroplasticity, not to mention joyful emotions as well as self-awareness. And there's a lot of payoffs of emotions, including depth of relationships and connection. And so remember, once you don't have to devote a lot of time to this stuff. It's just being aware of this and having this be a parallel part of your brain that's always there, riding along with you as you're doing what you do in life, at work, at home. This is just something that you are aware of and doing at the same time with the rest of life, and it just causes your higher brain to become more and more activated. So it's really just a matter of motivation, awareness, and being organized. Doesn't take a lot of time. You can reassure your lower brain. Don't worry, lower brain. We're not going to waste a lot of time on this and take away from our to-do list. Don't worry. We're going to have fun with this. Okay. And there's going to be a lot of payoff. So to summarize, and the reason it's so critical is that if you don't access your lower brain and start to develop a relationship and understanding of your lower brain, it'll keep activating in the background. Whether you face it or don't face it, it's still activating. It's very powerful, and it'll burn a hole with stress into your head, your heart, your stomach, your body. It's cortisol, the stress hormone. It's like acid. And it takes away energy. That's the problem with not dealing with the lower brain and not learning these things is we become more and more shut down, especially now with all the noise that there is. I don't care what your politics are. I'm not picking any political side, but the reality is that we have a lot of change and complexity and political blah 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 blah, right? So it starts to pull away energy. It's like, you know what, we're fine right here. We don't need to do anything. And so you lose energy, you get bored, depression, but that also leads to anxiety and stress and all the bad things. And relationships don't move forward. They're just like a zombie relationship. You're not really alive and dynamic and, tussling and wrestling and working things out and building trust and psychological safety, and then greater feelings of depth and connection and service to each other. And the opportunity cost of losing out on the promised land, right? That's the other tragedy is that we lose out on so much dynamism that every human being is capable of. And so if we choose to work together going forward, which I hope we do, what I will teach you is continue to build the gymnasium out of life, right? Keep lifting weights. I'm going to teach you more and more tools from that anchors table that I showed you. We're going to use the 4 and 6 step process to keep getting better at organizing a bunch of tools at the same time. And we're going to just embrace discomfort. We're going to welcome it when it shows up. Life just brings plenty of discomfort to us, or we're going to push into discomfort. And there's different kinds of discomfort. You can visualize difficult scenarios like you just did. We can role play in teams, which I'll have you do this afternoon with your managers. Um, you can have real life scenarios that you bring to the table. And then we can do group challenges. We want to ramp up discomfort. We can really do different kinds of, discussing controversies or tackling problems, learning to really measure and build psychological safety in meetings, holding ourselves to that standard. So there's different ways in which we can ramp up the discomfort and practice, all the tools that we've learned and all the 4 and 6 step processes. It doesn't take that many plans. You can have 3 or 4 plans probably, and it can deal with all those categories of discomfort, and you're good to go. You've taken yourself to another level, and then you'll just get better and better and better. I love this quote, people rarely succeed unless they have fun in what they are doing, right? So that's why we want to really learn to understand the lower brain, develop a relationship with it, cool it down, right? Activate the higher brain, and then you'll notice you expand all this power, better working memory, better IQ, better relationships, better creativity, all those spillovers that start happening. That's when life can be fun. And it doesn't matter what job you have. Let's say you're a bank teller, right? Standard process is greet a customer, process a transaction, resolve the issue. Wonderful, right? Here's a next level of that job, right? You may start to get in thinking that the job is becoming routine. But when you start to think in terms of higher brain and lower brain, you can check in, see how the customer is doing in your mind. How are you doing in terms of being lower brain or higher brain? Yeah, so that adds another dimension of richness and like having fun with this job. Like, wow, I'm not only doing this job, but I'm actually also lifting weights and building my higher brain, and I'm also working on helping this person become more higher brain. And so then you regulate, you shift higher, and then you then expand your capacity and you're really creative with your response. It could be your energy, your body language, the way you explain things, the soothing tone that you have, and then you measure the outcome. Hey, was a customer, did they seem like they got shifted higher? Did they seem happier? Did you were able to solve the problem? And so you just work now, no matter what the job, it becomes a platform and a gymnasium for really continuing to build your higher brain, be more creatively fearless, and then help other people go a higher brain and become creatively fearless. Life is endlessly rich at that point. And so I'm so grateful for you taking this ride with me. We really do need each other to be able to become more and more higher brain. This QR code is there, scan it, subscribe to that YouTube channel. All the revenue that I derive from it, I'll use for either hunger or homelessness or mental health programs. So I do not care about the money or the profit. And so keep that in mind. But you know, it's really important for you to learn, expand your tool set in order to really get better and better at self-regulation and co-regulation. And you can quickly develop plans for every discomfort or difficult conversation scenario. There aren't that many. There's like 10 in my mind. And so you can have even just two or three plans that can help with all of those. That's it. Make a plan, practice it, keep adding some more brain tools, have fun, right? In time, you'll be very much able to facilitate other people learning this. Play the videos from my YouTube channel and have a discussion about it and role model how you do this. And it makes it safer for other people to be vulnerable and to practice being aware of the lower brain, acknowledging it, and then using some technique or tool to shift higher. And so, really, you can bring this to your community or family or department. Be a facilitator of these tools. There's nothing more satisfying than really empowering other people and creating psychological safety for them by you role modeling vulnerability and also being a scientist of your higher brain and lower brain. And so, like I said, watch the YouTube channel. You can watch as many of these videos. I'll keep putting the whole system on there. So keep watching these videos. And if you want to get a head start. And then, yeah, let's see. We really do need each other. So try to create communities within work, within your family, outside in society. Let's create sort of communities to be gymnasiums so we can spot each other in lifting weights and become more and more higher brain. As we have more and more people becoming higher brain dominant, groups of higher brain dominant people can do a really good job of resolving conflict and solving problems. And we've got a lot of complex problems in front of us. Let's activate a whole bunch of people to become higher brain. And then we come together to really solve problems for our brothers and sisters. And so I'm very hopeful that we can do this quite quickly, but we do need to upgrade our brains in order to deal with how rapidly changing society is, how complex it is, how polarized it is, how much people, how lower brain we are. We've got to upgrade our software of our brain in order to meet this moment, but it's very doable very quickly, and especially if we do this together. So, with that, thank you so much for taking the time to learn these things and to teach others. We really do need each other, but I'm very hopeful. Okay, thank you so much.